Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Bethany.
And I'm Ken.
And we're just a couple of spooky kids in love who love scary stuff.
It's true. It's true.
It is true.
Mainly
At least I am.
Yeah.
Me. I'm the one who wimps out, but I'm also the one who loves it.
Exactly.
And we're going to dive into some SCP today. And so this is SCP-001, When Day Breaks.
Yeah, and so we got some SCP videos down below in the description of this video for a playlist. We've done SCP-001 before, but there's a bunch of different variations, I guess, of SCP-001, and we were told this one in particular was very spooky.
Love it.
All right, you ready to check this out?
I'm ready.
You've been walking for days. Your body aches. You're dripping with sweat from the heat of the sun bearing down overhead.
Sounds awful.
And yet you're wrapped up in layers upon layers of clothing. Even your face is covered. And you're wearing thick black goggles so that not a single centimeter of your body is exposed. Your journey has been long, and you feel like you might die from exhaustion or from overheating due to these multiple layers
sounds
of
terrible.
clothes. But dying is better than being exposed. You saw it happen when your entire team changed. The light cannot be trusted, not even for a fraction of a second. It's been like this for years. You've learned and survived through painful experience. Many of those you used to know cannot say the same. You've been alone for so long. You might have given up all hope if it wasn't for the distress signal coming from a nearby SCP Foundation containment facility, Site 46. Any kind of survivors would be better than nothing, no matter what kind of sorry shape they were in, as long as they were still human. You find your way to an opening in the side of a mountain and slide into the cave, hoping
This is
you
perfect
weren't
for a horror
spotted. The whole world is crawling with those things now. You can't let yourself be seen. As you trudge down the cave towards the entrance, you see what looks like a huge black snail trail splattered on the ground, leading into the facility. You try to avoid it and press on. You don't even need a key card to enter. The door has been left ajar. The facility reeks of those things, but you can't see any of them. You just hope they've moved on and left some human survivors in their wake. The place looks abandoned. Every step you take echoes through the empty halls. When you find that the elevator's out, you take the stairs all the way down to level B5, Keter Containment. Lucky for you, it seems all the cells are empty now. The horrors that were kept inside of them have all long since flown the coop. You keep following that slimy black trail until you find an abandoned office. There are no people here anymore. Just a broken barricade, some empty medicine bottles, and a bucket that the people inside the office had apparently been using as a toilet. You breathe a sigh of disappointment at finding no one alive here, but you're at least relieved to be out of the sun. You can finally remove your jacket and head wrap. With your uncovered eyes, you notice that a nearby computer terminal is still powered up. You sit down at the desk and turn on the monitor. Because of the emergency procedures put into place in a K-class scenario like this, safeguards no longer apply. You can access all the information you need, up to and including finding out what actually happened. In the dull glow of a nearby emergency light, you see a dark shape slumping through the halls in shadow. You tense up, then exhale as it slithers off into an adjoining hall. You're safe, for now. The terminal has finally loaded and authenticated your access. You're staring at the file for SD Lock's proposal for SCP-001 When Day Breaks. It's the only name you can give the apocalypse your world is currently experiencing. This is one of the only anomalies in the entire history of the SCP Foundation to be given the Apollyon Containment class, meaning containment is truly impossible. SCP-001 is the most dangerous enemy that the Foundation and planet Earth has ever faced.
The sun?
It's always been the principle of the SCP Foundation to battle in the dark, so that the civilian world can thrive in the light. But now the light has become the enemy. Anyone exposed to any amount of sunlight for even the briefest period of time is subjected to the effects of SCP-001, and those effects are beyond horrifying. The SCP Foundation Administrator released an urgent memo telling Foundation
Dudes come
personnel to
urgently.
make their way to Site-19 at all costs. because they need all the help they can get. Those exposed to SCP-001 in the process are no longer considered human. Their new designation is SCP-001-A. These new entities are to be avoided at all costs. But in case of emergencies, the administrator says it is permitted to cut off parts of your transformed comrades and eat them to avoid starvation. No attempt should be made to kill them, since you won't succeed. You'll just put yourself at risk. When the sun changed and became SCP-001, it instantly affected 6.8 billion innocent people. The second the visible light touched them, whether it was from the sun itself or even reflected off the moon, their bodies liquefied, melting like candle wax into puddles of living gelatinous slime. This effect isn't isolated to humans either. Any biological entity exposed to sunlight immediately underwent this same irreversible melting process into SCP-001-A, and the horror had only just begun. People transformed into SCP-001-A will remain shades of their former intelligence and personality. They may even try to will their new gooey mass into a shape resembling their original form. However, these individuals will lose their sense of self if they come into contact with other instances of SCP-001-A. When they come together, 001-A instances will bond on a molecular level, wading up into horrific giant blobs with only one purpose: integrating more matter into their bodies. That's why they have to be avoided at all costs. You continue to search the computer terminal for answers. Perhaps there was some kind of contingency plan put in place for this, some way to reverse the effects, or at least escape the nightmare Earth has become. Instead, you find a series of attachments linked to the SCP-001 file, detailing what seems to be the last days of the people who barricaded themselves in the facility. Most prominent among these were researcher Dr. Logan Igada, her partner Ari, a security officer named Commander Anad, and a few others. Dr. Igada had locked herself in the office, where she recorded her final messages to the world. In the first audio log, Dr. Igada and her companions seemed afraid, but hopeful that there may be some way out of this situation. Dr. Igada reported that most of the workers at the facility were transformed during the initial event. Their melted bodies had fused outside the facility, and now they were trying to bust their way back in. The defenses had held so far, though, and they seemed confident they would hold long enough for them to figure out a way to escape this awful situation. You open the second attachment,
worse than a horde of
an
zombies.
incident report, and realize things may not have been as hopeful as Dr. Igada let on. She reported hearing the huge mass of melted creatures hammering on the door outside again, begging for them to come out and experience the sun with them. They wanted desperately to add to their ever-growing biomass. In order to experiment with what exactly would happen, they sent out one of their few remaining D-classes wearing a full protective suit. He didn't last long.
Yeah.
The huge creature grabbed him with tentacles made of reconstituted flesh. He began ripping off his protective suit as he screamed for mercy. It was a monster made of dozens of people and animals. He could never overpower it. The second the sun touched his skin, he melted away and was absorbed by the great mass holding him in place. Guns were ineffective against these SCP-001-A super entities. Fire would do no good. It seemed that extremely low temperatures were the only way to slow the immense blobs down.
Makes sense.
And even then, not permanently. There was one ray of light in the darkness. The site director had a secret tunnel underneath his office, connected to a tram that could hopefully take them directly to Site-19 without risk of SCP-001 exposure. It was a good plan, and by far the best option they had available to them. But the best plans often don't work in practice. You open the next attachment on the terminal. This time, it's a video feed. You can actually see Dr. Logan Igada, and she looks harrowed by what she's experienced. As it turns out, while the others, including her partner Ari, attempted to escape through the tunnel, something had happened. Dr. Igada heard Ari's voice over her radio, but there was something wrong with it. It was too low, too guttural, and filled with gurgles. SCP-001 had gotten her. She was changed. The monster from above had crawled in through the ceiling. It had taken them all of them, and converted them into something less than human. Any hope of escape now seemed gone. Ari told Dr. Igada that it would be fine, that it was such a bright, beautiful, sunny day outside, and she was wasting it locked up inside that office. She tormented Dr. Igada with their shared memories of picnics in the park on sunny days in the past. The monster with Ari's voice did everything it could to try to convince Dr. Igada to give up and join them.
Terrible.
But she wasn't ready to go just yet. You look away from the screen when you hear a sound in the corner. You see a dark puddle of some unknown substance, and then some skeletal hands rising out of it. The hands are pulling themselves out of the puddle, followed by a skeletal face covered in matted hair. You have to stop yourself from screaming, until a flash from a nearby security light makes the figure disappear. It's a normal puddle, once again. Your mind is playing tricks on you. You open the next attachment, another video, and see that Dr. Igada's condition has deteriorated. She looked pale, frantic, and thin. She was using a knife to draw her own blood onto a piece of blood-stained parchment covered in strange symbols. Igada ranted about her theory. What if 001 took the minds and bodies of its victims, but not their souls? Through performing some kind of arcane blood ritual, she hoped to at least rescue and keep the soul of Ari, even if her mind and body were lost. You open the next attachment. It seemed that Igada's ritual worked, but not in the way she hoped. The twisted soul of Ari, driven mad by SCP-001, had taken over the file. It begins corrupting the text of the SCP-001 file into crazy ranting about how futile it is to fight. It then cuts to an even more frightening video feed. Dr. Igada, in her sleep, tossing and turning in a makeshift bed in the corner of her office. The camera approaches her, in first person, and lingers over her sleeping body. An oily skeletal hand reaches past the camera and runs its fingers through Dr. Igada's hair. It's that exact same hand you saw reaching out of that black puddle earlier. You must have seen Ari's lingering spirit. With a lump in your throat, you open the next attachment and watch the video. You see Dr. Igada, now truly broken. She'd been haunted by Ari's demonic spirit for a long time now, and it has clearly taken its toll. She is waving around a handgun while she speaks. She now believes there is only one way to escape, but not like this. She doesn't want the gun to draw attention to her body. She doesn't want to become part of that mass, even if she is dead. She opens a drawer on her desk she's recording at and places the gun inside. Dr. Igada then apologizes to her loved ones who are likely long since dead or assimilated, and turns off the recording for the last time. In that moment, you realize there's a single drawer in the desk in front of you. When you reach forward and open it, you see the same handgun Dr. Igada was holding is laying inside. You pick it up and study it, weighing your options. Perhaps there truly is no other way out. Then you see an update on the file. One more attachment has been added while you were studying the gun.
Yeah,
you feel your heart pounding in your chest as you reach forward and open the attachment. The text has been changed entirely. The file on SCP-001 is now a poem, an ode to the sun, and to ultimate togetherness. Then a video file spontaneously opens itself on the screen. It's a video of you, shot from behind. You see those oily skeletal hands reaching for you in the dark, just like they did with Dr. Igada. In that moment, you panic and fire the gun behind you, hoping to scare off the spirit. Instead, the sound of the gunshots attracts something far worse. The immense blob of screaming, melted flesh charges towards the office. You try to barricade the door, but it is not enough. The flesh seeps and bursts through and grabs you in its meaty tentacles. You scream and try to escape, but it won't save you. Nothing will save you. The flesh carries you upstairs, out through the empty halls, out into the cave. You can see the light in the distance as the blob ferries you towards it. You won't be alone for much longer. In fact, you won't be alone ever again.
Yeah, that one was truly horrific.
Oh, yeah. It was funny, at one point they talked about how, like, you know, finding survivors, any survivors would be better than nothing, and all I could think was, well, they haven't watched The Walking Dead. I mean, the most awful things that humans are capable of has been recorded throughout history, and they are the worst kinds of nightmares you could possibly have. I can't remember who said it, but someone was famously quoted as saying, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact words, but basically that nothing scared them more than what a human is capable of doing to another human. And that just came to mind when they're like, oh, finding survivors is great. Any survivors is better than nothing. I'm like, is it?
This one just seemed very ripe for being a film, like a horror film, with the whole, like, you have to block yourself out from the sun, and there's these, like, you know, gelatinous candle wax human being monsters that are like coming by and just kind of collecting things and getting bigger and bigger as they go, and you're basically living like a vampire's life because like you can't go out in the sun. But they didn't talk about that, like what happens at night.
Yeah, because the sun reflects off the moon, so the only time you could go out at night would be when there's no moon.
Okay, so like that's what I was, but like I would have liked for them to like have addressed that too, like, you know, like at night you couldn't go out because of that, you know, because you couldn't get like in the moonlight either. I don't know. And then for the SCP-001, for the like it being the sun, like what was the trigger for it to turning from the sun into an SCP? And you know, do they know how or why that sort of happens? So it brings up a lot of questions, but it definitely was probably the most horrific one. Like a lot of times we like to think about, at least I like to think about, like how the different SCPs would like interact with each other. Like what would the Desire camera do taking a picture of the sun, of the SCP-001 when day breaks? Like if that was it, what would the desire of that SCP be?
All humans in one gelatinous.
Well, I guess, yeah,
Like
I guess everything in a gelatinous tower, because it said it wasn't just humans,
that's
though,
true,
it was everything. Now, it was living beings like, they said animals. Were plants included in that?
I was wondering the same thing, because plants are part of biology. It said all biological entities, I think, or beings is what it said, and plants fall under the realm of biology.
Yeah, and so if they're, you know, clicked on the plants too, and that's all melting, then it feels like you'd be dead in a matter of hours as soon as the sun melts all the plant life and everything, and like you can't like reproduce oxygen at all, and you know, it seems like that gelatinous blob would never get to you because you'd be dead anyways.
It does make you think, because I mean we watch survivor shows. I mean I referenced Walking Dead earlier. SCP always talks about like the survivors who are going to persevere through the attacks of whatever the SCP is before the SCP is eventually brought into containment.
Yeah.
It's natural for us as humans to always want to be like, yeah, I'm going to be a survivor. I'm going to stick it out until the bitter end and all this stuff. But like, when you start to really think about the reality of it, it does make you wonder, like, no, I think I'd be happy going in the first wave. Like, I don't need to stick around to see all of it. Like, poor Dr. Igada, who, okay, she survives all of the awfulness of having to be wrapped head to toe in terrible heat and wandering through the desert, like the person that we're following as the protagonist in this, which in and of itself seems horrible. I mean, like, when was the last time that person got to shower or drink cold water, or like all of these things that we take for granted right now? But then Dr. Igada, a scientist, winds up going so mental with the torture of Ari's spirit or voice or, you know, whatever it is, that she goes from being a scientist to like a full-blown religious nutcase who's going to try to do a blood ritual to save her friend, to then just being like, okay, well, this is the end, here's the gun, and we even now don't know what ultimately happened to her, but it was nothing good. I mean, I don't know. Take me out in the first wave. I don't want my final days to be spent like that. I don't want to see torture and terrible stuff for my final weeks on Earth.
I think if I was going to make this into a movie, I would like tweak it a little bit here and there. Like I would think that the gelatinous blobs or whatever that like were coming after people could only survive in the sunlight, also in the moonlight or whatever. But like they wouldn't come into like certain underground areas. So, like, you know, people could be like living like in the subway and then like having to move like through like different subway things in order to try to get to places. I'd be interested to see a movie based on SCP-001 for When Day Breaks. I mean, it seems like that's a perfect title too. When Day Breaks. I mean, that's just it's right. Let's make it all right, people.
And see, for the movie, I'm gonna piggyback off of what you said and take it a step further. I wouldn't show the gelatinous blobs.
Yeah.
I would treat it like the shark in Jaws.
Yeah.
You hear it. You know it's out there. You feel it coming.
Yeah.
You don't see it. You see it in like the climactic moment of the movie. You see it at that ultimate point, but we don't see it throughout. We just hear the like squishy oozy of it approaching. We hear the voices of the people calling to their loved ones to entice them into the light, but we don't see the blob.
Did you ever see The Blob, the movie?
No.
The horror movie? I might have seen it as a kid. That's when I saw all my great horror movies. My brothers were great at showing me that kind of stuff.
And then he married a wife who's great at showing him that stuff.
Yeah, I just can't
escape it.
Can't escape it. I just want super heavy fun times. I don't want this. But let us know some more SCP to check out down below in the comments. And yeah, if you want more SCP videos, we got our playlist down below in the description of this video with all of our reactions for our SCP videos that we've seen so far. And includes some short films as well, not just stuff like that explains different SCPs. We saw some short films. But yeah, just keep in mind that our reaction to SCP-001 When Day Breaks
is definitely not definitive.